You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. And be sure to smash that like button. LSU, as they've rebuilt their coaching staff here, has kind of pillaged the Missouri defensive staff. They pulled 3 defensive assistants away. So I wanted to get some perspective from someone who covers Missouri. Eli Hoff's been good to us here. St. Louis Post-Dispatch. He's on Twitter at by Eli Hoff, Hoff, if you want to give him a follow. Eli, we appreciate it, man. How are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. How are y'all doing down there?
Doing well. What is the vibe around Missouri, considering obviously a great season, arguably the best season Missouri's had since they've been in the SEC, but then here comes all the defensive staff changes and all the sort of the turnover. What's the general feeling there?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a reality check, to say the least, just based on how the football season went and especially how it ended with that Cotton Bowl victory. There was a lot of assumption that the momentum would roll right into next season, and while that's certainly a case from a player personnel standpoint, I think these defensive losses were not something that a lot of people maybe had on their off-season bingo card. So it's complicated some of that process just already, but it's been a heck of an off-season everywhere in college football. So maybe that's just par for the course and what Missouri fans should have been expecting all along.
Hey, Eli, how good was Blake Baker?
Really good, really good. I mean, you look at what he did with this defense. I think the defense was good this season, but the more impressive job was what he did in 2022. That defense was not something that I think anybody expected a whole lot of, and he turned the Mizzou defense into one of the better ones in the SEC pretty much, I shouldn't say overnight, but very, very quickly. And he did well getting some of the personnel in there, did well coaching up some of the players. You look at the number of players who will probably be playing on Sundays next year from this Mizzou defense. I think you're going to be needing more than one hand to count them. And that's a testament, obviously, to some of these position coaches, but also to what Blake Baker did. And from a scheme standpoint, too, he was constantly innovating, bringing some of the different ideas he had from working under Manny Diaz, from spending some time at LSU before. He folded a lot together into this scheme. And so I think that was really a driving force, even just from a culture standpoint, for Missouri.
It seemed, Eli, like he was respected so much as well. When I saw the post that Eli Drinkwitz made, some of the players, Ennis Rakestraw and others, sort of congratulating Blake Baker and wishing him well. Is that a fair assessment that he was that he was liked there as well?
Oh, very much so. And even in this community at large, I think one of the things that not a lot of people know is that even during the football season, he still found time to be the head coach of his son's football team. They were in, I think, the U6 division. They won the local rec league here. And so he was known for showing up on weekends when he didn't have to be on the road and coaching teams here. So he was known in the Columbia football community, too, as a force in that. He connected with his players really well. He's one of those, we see him more and more often, I feel like, these kind of younger coaches who have a personality, who really go and connect with their players, who aren't afraid to show emotion, good, bad, or ugly, and kind of get buy-in that way. That's very much who he was. He wore his heart on his sleeve. And it sounds weird to talk about someone like that who's still very much alive, but
right.
He'll be missed. He'll be missed around campus on here by a lot of people in this football program.
Yeah, and just I want to talk about some of the other staff members as well, but one more on Baker, because he had just signed an extension to stay at Missouri as well, and I know that he was very conflicted about leaving, and Eli Drinkwitz made a strong push to keep him. Have you reported? Do you have any sense on how close Blake Baker was to staying in Columbia?
I mean, I think very close. He signed the extension, and I don't think you sign that extension unless you think you're staying somewhere, because he didn't have to sign the extension. He was still on contract. So that was a choice he made at that time based on the information and prospects he had. And I think even just the way he talked about Mizzou and his decision to stay when he was talking to reporters before the Cotton Bowl, he made it sound like Mizzou was the only place he ever wanted to be, that he had unfinished business. He said all these things that I think what made this hurtful for Mizzou fans is that he said things that maybe went above and beyond the requisite, like, I'm excited to stay and keep building stuff. he really seemed to effuse positivity when it came to Mizzou's future. And then, very quickly, I think it went to he's rumored as one of the candidates for LSU. Oh, he's the candidate, and then boom, he's gone in the middle of a Friday night.
Yeah, I was at dinner with my wife and another couple when the news broke. I'm like, yeah, you couldn't have done this at like 2 in the afternoon. It had to be at 8 o'clock on a Friday night. Eli Hoff is with us. He's on Twitter at @byelihoff, HOFF, if you want to give him a follow. St. Louis Post-Dispatch. I want to ask you about Kevin Peoples as well. LSU hasn't formally announced this yet, Eli, which is a little odd. I guess different schools can make the announcements however they want, but unless if you have something to the contrary, I'm assuming that this is done and Kevin Peoples will be on the LSU staff. What can you tell us about him?
Yeah, I'm hearing the same things that y'all are down there, that this is moving forward for Peoples to join the LSU staff. But he's someone who's very highly regarded both inside and outside the Mizzou program. He was the Mizzou staff's nominee for the Broyles Award, which is given to the nation's staff assistant, and was a semifinalist for that. So I think that says a lot about how he's regarded in coaching circles. He's obviously a coaching veteran, has been around a lot of defensive lines, has worked with a lot of defensive lines. I think in terms of Mizzou, his impact is probably most greatly felt with Darius Robinson, who this team moved from the interior to the edge this season. And he went out, and it took him a couple games to settle in, but really put together a fantastic season. And will again, he's one of those guys who will probably be playing on Sundays next year. So his impact was really felt just in specific players. Again, he has a role to play in culture, but he really became very good at working individually with some of these guys and making them fit on the edge.
Yeah, LSU hired Bo Davis, who's going to be the defensive tackles coach. So is it safe to assume Peoples working with outside linebackers, defensive ends, edge rushers, like that's going to be his specialty?
I would assume so. That's what his role was at Mizzou. Mizzou had the same setup of they had an inside linebackers coach, they had a defensive tackles coach, and they had Kevin Peoples working with the people outside of that. So that's where I would assume he slotted in. That's where he's had past success too. It seems like that position group is really his specialty.
What about recruiting? I know Peoples has a lot of history in Louisiana. He coached at Tulane for 4 years. And it seems like Brian Kelly's building a staff of really high-level elite recruiters. Does Peoples have a reputation there?
Oh, 100%. And I think you really only have to look at one name on the list, and that's Williams Nwaneri, who's the top-rated edge rusher, who was an in-state recruit who chose Mizzou over really. I think he probably could have gone to any program in the country if he wanted to, and chose to sign with Mizzou. And at the time, that was to work with Kevin Peoples and work with Blake Baker and this defensive staff. So his ability to sell that to a recruit, I think, shouldn't be understated when he can go after those top-level guys. Obviously, that's who Brian Kelly's going to want. That's what any program is going to want. But I'm guessing that's a large part of his appeal for LSU specifically.
Eli, there's another name that popped up last night, but apparently it was our friend Billy Embody from On 3 who reported that Jake Olsen is also going to be joining the LSU staff, and apparently he's been here since Blake Baker got here a couple of weeks ago. Can you confirm that, or is there anything that you've heard about Jake Olsen?
I can't confirm that for you. It's one of those things, some of these GA and analysts and kind of behind-the-scenes moves tend to happen real quickly and not as publicly as a lot of these coaches with actual coach titles and coaching titles and responsibilities and such. So it wouldn't surprise me. None of this surprises me that Blake Baker's trying to bring these guys down to LSU with him. He had a heck of a staff assembled here that I think a lot of us maybe wondered, how long is the staff really going to stay together, just given the nature of college football? So seeing any of these guys move doesn't really surprise me, especially if they want to keep working with their old boss. Was
Olsen a guy that had any type of reputation in Como? I mean, obviously with analysts, sometimes it's out of sight, out of mind. You're not on field. But was there anything that you all ever covered or wrote about or knew about with Jake Olsen?
Nothing too crazy, nothing that really jumps to mind, but he was well regarded. He obviously played a role in the defensive turnaround. So, anytime you lose any sort of staff, that's going to have an impact. But again, in that behind the scenes role, he wasn't someone who we saw or heard from on a particularly frequent basis.
What's the expectation coming off the Cotton Bowl for Missouri in 2024?
Well, I think for a lot of fans, it's making this 12-team playoff. You look at how Mizzou finished in the rankings this season, and if it had been 12 teams, they would have been in. So I think that's a large part of it. A lot of people are looking at Mizzou's schedule right now, and the two big games are away trips to A&M and Alabama, which if there was a time to face either of those programs, it's probably this upcoming season. So there are Mizzou fans who are looking at this schedule and saying, there's a chance there's not a loss on there. I don't think that's quite prudent, but I think looking at going through this season with another one or two losses, that's very much in the ballpark for Mizzou. But there's still a lot that has to come together in terms of, it's like with any program. The portal guys have to hit. You have to have your evaluations right. This defensive coordinator hire is a big one for Drinkwitz. He has to hit on that. And if that can come together, then, yeah, sure, 1 or 2 loss season, a spot in the top 12 is very much possible, but it's far from locked up.
He's on Twitter at by Eli Hoff, Hoff, St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Man, we appreciate a couple of minutes. Thanks, Eli.
For sure. Have a good one, y'all.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.